Seoul was loud that night. The kind of loud that hides heartbreak in the noise. Ji-hoon stood outside a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Han River. The city sparkled beneath him, 1,000 lights, none of which felt real. He held a small velvet box in his hand, his palms sweating despite the cold November air. He'd saved 6 months for this ring. It wasn't extravagant, just a thin silver band with a single diamond that caught light the way her eyes did when she laughed. Hannah. She came from a world he only saw through glass, hotel banquets, fashion shows, people who never checked price tags. He met her 2 years ago, during a renovation project for her father's hotel. She was polite, distant, but kind, the kind of woman who made you forget that love had rules. Now she was his girlfriend. At least, that's what he believed. When the elevator doors opened, Hannah stepped out, dressed in a beige wool coat, her long hair falling over her shoulders. Everything about her screamed effortless luxury. Even her sadness looked expensive. "Ji-hoon," she said softly, "you look nervous." He smiled faintly. "That obvious?" She nodded, trying to laugh, but something in her tone felt off, like she was holding back tears. He ignored it. He'd waited too long for this. "Come with me." They walked to the edge of the rooftop, where fairy lights glowed faintly against the night. The river shimmered below. He turned to her, heart pounding. "Hannah, we've been through so much. I know we come from different worlds, but every time I'm with you, that difference disappears. You make me feel like I belong somewhere." So, he knelt, opening the small box. "Will you marry me?" The air froze. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Only silence, the kind that bruises. Finally, she whispered, "Ji-hoon, get up." "Hannah. Please." Her voice cracked. He stood, confused. "What's wrong? You don't like the ring?" "It's not that." "Then what is it?" She looked away. "I can't marry you." The world tilted. "Why?" She inhaled shakily. "Because I'm already engaged." It took him a full 5 seconds to understand. Then his breath caught. "You're joking." "I wish I were." Her eyes glistened. "My parents arranged it. With Han Group's eldest son, Hanul. The engagement was planned years ago. I thought I could delay it, maybe escape it, but the announcement is tomorrow." Ji-hoon's throat tightened. "Tomorrow?" She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I didn't want you to find out this way." He laughed, bitter and broken. "Find out this way? You mean after I've spent months saving for this ring? After I've built my future around you?" "Ji-hoon." "No, Hannah. You let me dream. You let me think we were building something real." She flinched. "It was real." "Then why are you walking away?" "Because love doesn't keep the lights on," she whispered. "Because when you grow up in my world, love is a luxury, not a lifeline." He stared at her, this woman he thought he knew, and realized he'd never really seen her world. Her expensive silence. Her caged smile. She reached out, her hand trembling. "Please don't hate me," he stepped back. "I don't hate you. I just wish you'd let me stop loving you before it was too late." That night, Ji-hoon walked through the city until dawn. Rain fell hard, but he didn't care. Every streetlight felt like a question, what did I do wrong? He tried to drown her out, with work, with sketches, with noise. But she was everywhere. On TV, in interviews, on billboards beside her fiancé. Hannah Choi, daughter of Choi Hotels Group, soon-to-be wife of Han Hanul. They called it the merger of dynasties. Ji-hoon called it a funeral for love. A month passed. He still hadn't thrown away the ring. It sat on his desk, a reminder of the version of her he wished was real. Then, one evening, he got a letter. An invitation. Han Hanul and Choi Hannah, wedding ceremony. He tore it in half, but it didn't make him feel better. The night before the wedding, Jihoon walked past the luxury hotel where preparations were underway. He saw Hannah through the window, surrounded by stylists and laughter. Her eyes, however, told another story. For a moment, their gazes met through the glass. And in that instant, he saw everything, the fear, the guilt, the longing. Then she turned away. And just like that, she was gone. The wedding day arrived like a storm pretending to be calm. Seoul's sky was gray, heavy, and unkind. Jihoon didn't plan to go. But he went anyway. He told himself it was closure, but really, it was punishment. The ballroom shimmered with wealth, crystal chandeliers, white roses, and guests whose smiles were just business transactions in disguise. At the far end of the aisle stood Hanul, tall, sharp-suited, and every inch the perfect heir. When the music began, every head turned. Hannah appeared. A vision in lace and pearls. Beautiful. Unreachable. And utterly miserable. Jihoon stood hidden among the crowd, heart hammering. She looked past everyone, then, for a split second, her eyes found his. He saw the flicker of regret. The silent apology. Then she looked away. "I do," she said softly. And just like that, she was gone, again. Weeks turned into months. Jihoon buried himself in work, designing buildings that reached for the sky but left him empty. His co-workers whispered that he'd changed, quieter, colder, harder to reach. Then one night, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. But when he did, her voice froze him. Jihoon. He closed his eyes. Hannah. She was crying. "I shouldn't be calling, but I didn't know who else to talk to." "What happened?" Her voice trembled. "Hanul isn't who he seems. He drinks. He yells. He doesn't hit me, not yet, but he makes me feel like property. My parents tell me to endure it for the family name. Jihoon, I can't breathe." He clenched his jaw. "Then leave." "I can't. He's watching me." He exhaled sharply. "Tell me where you are. I'll come." "No. You'll only ruin yourself." He paused. "Then why call me?" "Because I needed to hear your voice," she whispered. "It's the only thing that reminds me I was once free." He swallowed hard. "You still can be." "Not in my world," she said quietly. "In my world, freedom costs too much." The line went dead. A week later, the news broke: Han Group heir and wife file for divorce after 3 months of marriage. Publicly, it was called irreconcilable differences. Privately, it was a woman escaping her golden cage. Jihoon didn't reach out. He didn't need to. He knew she would find him, if she truly wanted to. And one rainy afternoon, she did. He was sketching at a quiet cafe in Insadong when he saw her reflection in the window: no designer clothes, no bodyguards, no mask of wealth. Just Hannah. She looked thinner, softer, real. "Do you mind if I sit?" she asked. He didn't speak, just nodded. They sat in silence for a long time. Then she said, "My parents disowned me. Hanul made sure no one will hire me. I have nothing left." He looked at her. "You have yourself. That's something." Her lips quivered. "You should hate me." "I tried," he said quietly. "Didn't work." She laughed weakly. "I broke your heart." He shook his head. "No, Hannah. You just taught it what it means to survive." She wiped her tears, whispering, "Do you still love me?" He hesitated. "Then, yes. But not the way I used to. Back then, I loved you like a dream. Now, I love you like reality, flawed, fragile, but real." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe reality is enough." That night, As rain tapped against the cafe windows, they talked, about fear, choices, and what it meant to start over. For once, she didn't talk about luxury or family names. She talked about herself, about how she'd been raised to see love as weakness, until she met someone who made her realize it was strength. And Ji-hoon, who had once built cities, realized that maybe, the greatest thing he'd ever build was this moment. Not grand. Not perfect. But honest. The first few weeks felt like borrowed peace. Hannah and Ji-hoon had left Seoul quietly, slipping away like ghosts in the early dawn. They rented a small apartment in Busan, near the harbor, 2 rooms, 1 flickering light, and the sound of waves that made the silence bearable. No one knew where they were. At least, that's what they thought. It was morning. Hannah stood by the kitchen counter, pouring coffee into 2 chipped mugs. Ji-hoon sat by the window sketching, the ocean light reflecting off his paper. "You always draw when you're thinking too much," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "And you always make coffee when you're scared." She froze for a moment, then laughed weakly. "You still read me too easily." "I have to," he said, looking up at her. "You never tell me what's going on inside your head." She sighed. "Inside my head, is noise. Inside my heart, it's you. That's the only quiet I know." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "Then we'll keep it quiet here, okay?" She nodded. "Okay. But peace never lasts long in stories like theirs." That evening, while Hannah went out to buy groceries, Ji-hoon received a message from an unknown number. "You can't hide forever." No name. Just those words. He froze. He knew who it was. Hanul. The ex-husband she'd run from. The man whose pride had been publicly shattered by the divorce, whose family lost their business merger because she'd walked away. Ji-hoon deleted the message but couldn't shake the dread. When Hannah returned, humming softly, he forced a smile. "You got everything?" "Yeah," she said, dropping the bag. "Why do you look pale?" He hesitated. "Just tired." But Hannah could tell, something had shifted. Something dark had followed them to Busan. 2 days later, a stranger showed up near their street, a tall man in a black coat, pretending to check his phone while watching their building. Ji-hoon saw him first from the window. When he looked again, the man was gone. That night, he told Hannah everything. The text. The man. The fear. She sat still for a long moment, then whispered, "He found us." "Hannah. I knew this would happen," she said, her voice trembling. "Hanul doesn't lose. He doesn't forgive. I humiliated him, in front of his family, his father, the media." Ji-hoon took her hand. "We'll go to the police." She shook her head. "His family owns them." Silence. Finally, Ji-hoon said, "Then we run again." But Hannah stared at him, tears forming. "How long can we keep running, Ji-hoon? We're not characters in a movie. We're real." He met her gaze, firm and quiet. "Then we'll survive like real people do, together." It happened 3 nights later. Rain lashed against the windows, wind howling through the narrow streets of Busan. Ji-hoon was fixing the heater when he heard a loud crash outside, a car door slamming, heavy footsteps. Then, a knock. He opened the door slightly, and froze. Hanul stood there. Drenched, eyes wild, his expensive coat soaked through. "Hannah." Hanul shouted past him. "Come out. We're going home." Ji-hoon blocked the doorway. "You need to leave." Hanul's expression twisted. "You think you can take what's mine?" "She's not yours anymore," Ji-hoon said quietly. Hanul shoved him back, storming inside. Hannah appeared from the kitchen, trembling. "Hanul, please. Get your things," he barked. "We're leaving tonight." "No," she said, her voice steady for the first time. I'm not going anywhere with you. Hanul's face darkened. You think this is over because of a divorce paper? You embarrassed me, Hana. You destroyed my name. He reached for her wrist. Ji-hun grabbed his arm. Don't touch her. Hanul swung. The punch connected, sending Ji-hun stumbling into the wall. Stay out of this. Hanul shouted. But Ji-hun stood again. Blood on his lip, eyes steady. You hurt her once. You won't do it again. They struggled, the lamp crashed, glass shattered. Hana screamed. Suddenly, Hanul pulled something from his coat, a small gun. Stop! Hana cried. Ji-hun froze. The sound of rain filled the silence. Hanul's hand trembled. If I can't have her, no one will. He fired. A loud crack echoed through the room. For a moment, time stopped. Then, Hanul's face went pale. He stared at the body on the floor. The man he shot wasn't Ji-hun. It was the stranger he'd hired, his own bodyguard, who had stepped in through the open door at the worst possible moment, trying to intervene. Chaos erupted. Hana screamed. Ji-hun pulled her behind him. Hanul stared in horror, dropping the gun. You weren't supposed to, he stammered. Sirens began wailing in the distance. Someone had called the police. Hana, Ji-hun whispered urgently, grabbing her hand. We have to go, now. They ran out into the storm. Rain drenched their faces as they fled through the narrow alleys, Hana barefoot, clutching Ji-hun's arm. Behind them, blue lights flashed against the wet concrete. They didn't look back. By dawn, they had reached the outskirts of Daegu. A friend of Ji-hun's, a former colleague, gave them a small room above an old art shop. It wasn't much, but it was safety. Hana sat by the window, watching the sunrise. He won't stop, she whispered. Ji-hun sat beside her. Maybe he doesn't have to. Maybe this time, we stop running. She turned to him, eyes red. And do what? He took her hand. Live. Quietly. Honestly. Together. She smiled weakly. You make it sound easy. It isn't, he said. But it's real. 2 days later, the news spread everywhere. Han Group Air under investigation after fatal incident in Busan. The media called it a tragic accident. The company's lawyers worked fast. Hanul was hospitalized for mental shock. But no one mentioned Hana. It was as if she'd vanished from existence. And maybe that was a good thing. One evening, as the city lights of Daegu shimmered in the distance, Hana whispered, Do you regret it? Ji-hun looked at her, puzzled. What? Loving me. He smiled faintly. Every second hurt. Every moment broke me. But no. I don't regret a single thing. Because I finally learned what love really costs. She leaned against his shoulder. And what's that? Everything, he said softly. And it's still worth it. Tears slipped down her cheek. Then promise me one thing. What? If one day I disappear again, don't come looking. Just live. He turned to her. I can't promise that. She smiled sadly. That's what I was afraid of. Weeks later, a quiet montage unfolds. Hana painting near the window. Ji-hun working on new architectural sketches. Street markets bustling. The two of them walking by the Daegu River at sunset. A peace that feels fragile, but earned.